Okay, so we seem to have had the orientation locked as well, so if I go like this it tells me that I can't, so I'm just going to change that quickly just so we can see. Okay, I'm live, but I can't rotate. Orientation is locked, so I take the device back. Okay, so we'll just have to have a camera like this. So I'm just going to, you can't really see, but I'm just going to turn the camera around. So we're just going to jump in here and show you a little bit of the marine life, and hopefully a little look around. I'll prop that up with the diving mask. Careful not to jump on any sea urchins, which is always a good way to start a day, and then see what we can do here. So this hopefully is a new way of doing things. One of the problems we've had so far on Coral Live is not being able to show you what's underwater so easily. So by sea, hopefully, actually I'm going to turn you the other way up because the camera's on the other side. Rotate the device. This is very confusing. So, hi, I've got a hey bro there, and it's very difficult to see on the screen. Great, we're live again. So I'm just going to put on a dive mask and try and work this out a bit better. So we've got good signal, but what I've found is that if we're going too far underwater, it's taking that away. So we're just going to, apologies for this. So for some reason we've got locked in our mode, and I'm just being careful of not stepping on any sea anemones as we set up. So, coming here. I'll take you up on a bit of coral. Now, on Coral Live, what we're trying to do is introduce schools and students to the wonders of the coral environment. And so, what we're constantly doing is trying to push how far we can do this. And one of the problems that we've had is a sort of a jerry-rigging, sort of a wireless network down to the edge of this island. So apologies whilst I just have a bit of a... We've had a great morning here. We've had this school of jacks that's been incredibly aggressive, getting all the bait fish in and around. But hopefully what we could do now is start to show you some of these things underwater. Now, how far or how deep we can get the camera is currently a matter of experimentation. So that's one of the issues that we have. But I'm just going to turn around, and first of all we're going to look at an anemone. Now, anemones are related to coral jellyfish, and make sure I don't step on an urchin or any fire coral, which would just be painful. And we're just going to see whether we can have a look at an anemone. So look at the tentacles, look at the coloration, and then down to the left hand side of it, down sort of this way, you'll see some fire coral, and that's not a true coral, but you'll see sort of branching with white tips, so we're definitely not going to be touching that. So again, turn the camera around. Very bad connection, I don't know why. Turn the camera around. Can't see a thing. Here we go. Great, so obviously what we're having little issues with is with the internet underwater. So what I'm going to try and do is get a little bit closer to the anemones I was talking about. And this place, I can't really see what you're seeing, but hopefully what we can do here is give you a view of this underwater world without losing a connection. And then over here we have the fire coral. Sorry. And hopefully what that's doing is it's giving you a picture of the underwater world and keeping the connection going. Now, if I come over this way, and try not to step on the urchin, it's incredibly blurry down there. Why is it so blurry? And so hopefully what you can do there, all I can say is that we're trying our hardest to give you a good image of the underwater world, although technology is against us. Now that huge, great black blob, very unkind, and there's another one just up here, is a sea cucumber. And a sea cucumber is related to a starfish. It's an echinoderm. It's also related to the sea urchin that's by my foot. And they perform a very important role of sucking through all the sand for sort of nutrients. That's basically from sort of like dead bits of flesh or bacteria, and getting those and really cleaning through the sand like that. So there's a few. Now I'm going to get some feedback on this. This is the first time we've tried this, and I can tell you that I'd love to be able to do more. There's this amazing anemone just under here. Is to upside down, but I've got some weird pressure on the screen coming from the water that's doing odd things, and hopefully you can just get a little sense of oh, and here we have some grey snapper. How big do they grow? I mean, they grow pretty huge. So sea cucumbers a foot long, and some of them smaller. They're a cash crop. They're a sort of a food crop in places like Southeast Asia, what they call the Bêche de Mer. So they have been overfished quite a bit, but they, yeah, huge and ugly. Sorry, we shouldn't be calling things ugly or beautiful. That skews our understanding of the environment often. Okay, hopefully I'm live again. I'm just going to turn around the camera. So all I can tell you, what I've learned so far today, is that it is very difficult to operate underwater. So there's some great questions coming through, and so we'll continue to try and take you underwater and test out the capabilities here in Bermuda. But some great questions coming through, which I'm just going to have a look at now. But the touchscreen through this is proving elusive. So I'm just going to have to sort of kind of guess what you said, which is a little bit frustrating. Oh, show live chat messages, but I can't see them anywhere. So if any questions were asked in the past, okay, from Hannah Sumter, how does the plastic nation affect coral ecosystems? Plastic is a big issue across marine ecosystems, and it's really sort of in a number of ways. So if we look at the sort of fact of the whole coral ecosystem, so crikey, I'm not going to be able to remember these, and they're going to disappear in seconds. So Hannah's question. So what we have is to look at the two main impacts. One of which is entanglement. Bigger bits of coral, bigger bits of plastic, actually physically damaging marine life, such as turtles getting wrapped around them and that kind of thing. The second piece is going to be around getting into their guts, so blocking up guts. If you open, and in fact there's a research project going on at the moment, opening up different fish and everything else, and seeing how much plastic is inside them and how it's affecting their growth and other metabolic functions. Sorry. And the third is which is also being looked at the moment, is the way in which plastics concentrate some of the other pollutants in the water, and how that concentration occurs up the food chain. If we just have the next question, just whilst if you're ever doing a YouTube live broadcast, what happens is that about 5 questions appear at once, and you've got sort of like 20 seconds to memorise them all, which I'm afraid I haven't been able to do. So I know there's some great questions from Jodie Visconti and her class. What actions are you team members taking to protect your coral reefs? So one of the ways in which science can help people protect coral reefs is through providing in-depth information about what is happening and what some of the environmental impacts are. And so there is that connection between science and policy, and that that's really, really important, that we have decisions being made using up-to-date information, and so that whether that be protecting a certain species from fishing, or banning a certain fishing method, or not having a development in a certain place, all these different things. So there are different ways of science being able to help make policy decisions. The instrumentation in studying the reef. So there's lots of different ways you can take samples, or you can measure. There's 2 basic things you might be doing: a transect. So that's where you are following along a line. You might be looking at species abundance. You might be looking at the number of different species, diversity. You might be looking at the rugosity of coral, so that's how sort of bumpy it is, essentially. You might be doing some water sampling, in which case you'd be taking samples in potentially a Niskin bottle, and that would be looking at could be looking at ocean chemistry, or it could be looking at other factors. You could also be photographing the reef and doing what's called a visual transect, so having a photographic record of the reef and being able to look at things like reef health and reef diversity over time. So next question, please. What is the biggest threat in the reef to the reef? I think it's important to look at threats to the reef as what people call a multiple stressor environment. So if, for instance, there are a number of threats to the reef here. If climate change were the only threat, then reefs might be okay, or might be more resilient to change. If overfishing or invasive species were the only threat, then again, reefs might be able to cope a little bit better. But because there are all these threats, sort of triple, quadruple whammy coming at reefs at the same time, I think that's what people are sensing at the moment. So yes, there is this wider systemic issue for all habitats of climate change and of decreasing our emissions and trying to stall, at least mitigate to some extent, the impact of carbon emissions on global temperatures. And sorry, there's just looking at what's crawling around my feet. And then there's taking action on a local level, looking at whether coastal developments, whether it's plastics into the ocean. I mean, plastics are very connected, so that's all of our responsibility. But marine protected areas, fishing quotas, fishing types, those kinds of things. Working with, so two questions there, sort of working with Bermuda scientists, I think one of the things I've really struck me is that they're very, very proud of their reef here. It's a more sort of seasonal reef, so because it's a sort of more northerly latitude, I think it's the most northerly reef in the Atlantic. It's been spared some of the worst excesses that have affected reefs further south in the Caribbean, in terms of overfishing and in terms of the impact of climate change. So bleaching events haven't traditionally affected the reef here so much. So the scientists are very, very proud of their reef, and visiting scientists are often sort of amazed about how pristine it is. So that's been really, really great. Great to hear. But just sort of, do we believe the hype that the coral ecosystem is under threat globally? Yes. Certainly, and you only have to watch the news and see some of those changes. And I think it's sort of 80% of reef in the Caribbean has been lost over the past decades. I think nearly half of the coral in the Great Barrier Reef has been affected too. So how often do I dive? At the moment it's all snorkel based out here, and not often enough is the answer to that. I think the most interesting part of the job this year has been seeing the difference in the reef here, and so the classical reef structure that you might find on other reefs in terms of a sort of mix of branching corals and boulder corals and that kind of thing. Really here it's very much the brain coral and star corals, and also then a lot of soft coral, and I hadn't seen so much soft coral altogether before. So it's the different reef here, and it's absolutely fascinating to see. Can you show us some animals you see in the water? Certainly. I'm going to try to anyway. The last time I tried to do that, it didn't work very well. So some of the animals, I was just going to try it around. I can't even see which way that's facing. There we go. So the top of the screen is completely salted up, so I can't actually see what I'm showing you. So hopefully what you can see there again is a sea cucumber. If we come over this way, there's a variety of different species of fish. These are mostly juvenile fish, because what we're seeing here is we're in a sort of nursery habitat. So these are mostly juvenile fish, and especially all these Bermudian anchovy, although the Bermudian anchovy doesn't get much bigger than this. So there we go. And some other animals you might see: anemones, sponges. People always think about animals on the reef as being, the big sort of glamorous species, but it's all the small ones and habitat forming ones as well that make a big difference. So I'm just trying to turn the camera around. So we can't turn the camera around at the moment, but that's okay. I don't know whether it's as blurry as that coming through on your end as well. So any questions? Because I've got sort of about 10 there, but of course they all disappeared at once. Where's the magic one button? Ah. Is that better? There we go. It was sea gunk that was fucking that up. I think it's a nice word for it. And so we'll see if we can turn this round again. No, but any other questions would be great. I don't know how far we are through this call. I think we've got about another five minutes before I turn into a prune. How often do you have? What has been the most interesting? Can you show us any animals in the water? Oh, come on, further down. And then they've all gone again. I just missed that last one. There's an arrow pointing down. Can you actually see anything? Is the sea life here as rich as the Barrier Reef? It depends. I mean, it depends where you go on the Barrier Reef, and some areas of the Barrier Reef are incredibly rich. Also, this isn't the coral reef proper. This is sort of inland, sort of sound, really, and so one of the things here is that the reefs tend to be deeper, whereas the reefs on the barrier reef tend to be a bit shallower. So it sort of compresses the sort of sea life into a small amount of area. So it's very difficult to tell. I mean, I think that one of the things that's been brilliant here is the amount of parrotfish. So there's that been that abundance of parrotfish, which has been amazing to see. Really, really great. That I think's been the best thing, is to see that abundance of those beautiful fish, and huge as well. But certainly the diversity, I mean, hasn't been as large. But the reef here is really healthy, so it's difficult to tell. I think if you were diving on some of the reefs that hadn't been too badly affected on the Great Barrier Reef, you might see a greater diversity. Favorite research adventures? Wow. Well, I think certainly when we were working in East Timor on the previous Coral Live, we definitely had adventures. We were told off for not taking crocodile watchers with us out onto the reef. We nearly stepped on sea snakes when we were looking at gleaning, which is the habit of sort of searching around the reef flats for invertebrates. And so it's definitely a very big adventure there. And we seem to have got a fairly stable picture for you at last. So those were good adventures. I think the adventure ones are always a bit further away. The Arctic's been pretty adventurous over time as well. Go and find some coral. That would be novel. So I can see where make sure I don't step on any coral. Or can corals be dangerous? They can be dangerous if you scrape them. So I'm just going to come round to this coral here. So here we go. It's a nice coral. So some of the mucus can get into you and affect you if you have a coral scrape. So they can be dangerous in that way. The fire coral over there that gives you a nasty sting isn't actually a true coral. So can corals be dangerous? Not really. We're definitely much more dangerous to corals than they are to us. Any other questions? Have any animals ever tried to attack you? So in terms of attack, I mean, there's some territorial animals around. I mean, clownfish can get very territorial and attack your dive mask if you get too close to their anemones. So they can be pretty territorial. But mostly other animals has the temperature of water changed for some years. Certainly there's been a sort of larger warm water eddy this year, but I don't have, to knowledge, good sort of long-term data on the Bermudian sea temperature. This show you a really cool thing. You can probably see. There we go. This sea urchin down here, which has covered itself with leaves to disguise itself, which I think is fairly cool and quite fun. So that just through from that question was the one I just tried to answer there. if you just let me know whether my answer was there we go, whether my answer came through or not, that'd be great. So if we could just get this working a bit better with the camera turning around. What made you want to explore? Aha! We have buttons at work again. Fantastic. I think the world is completely awesome. And so I think that if you have the opportunity to go and explore and go and find out what's in the world, then you should definitely take it. I'm just going to try and clean the salt off the front camera here. So, and the natural environment, the diversity of human culture, I think it is amazing, and I think that it also wanting to know what's over the next horizon or under a rock or whatever. I think it's an innately human thing, and I would just, wherever you are, being an explorer doesn't mean you have to sort of cross massive mountain ranges or go to the bottom of the ocean. It can be as simple as turning over a rock to see what's there, or going to a rock pool. If you're in the UK, going to a rock pool and thinking, the diversity of life in a rock pool is absolutely stunning. And just being curious. And I think it's great also to think about scientific exploration. So how can you continue your study at school so that you can more accurately explore in terms of recording data and finding out how ecosystems work. Well, I think that's nearly our time. So unless there are no other sort of burning questions, I am going to jump out of the water. And it's been absolutely lovely speaking to you all. We will perfect during this week. So this is the second week of Coral Live. So during this week, we will try and perfect our underwater, or at least sort of glimpse of underwater techniques a bit better. We've had a great morning this morning. It's been sort of a lot of noise out here on Trunk Island. There's a big school of jacks scooching around, making a lot of noise, trying to eat the bait fish, and then a whole bunch of herons who are very excited by all of this, and who are joining in the fun. Anyway, thank you so much for being part of this YouTube live session. Thank you. Bye bye. Actually, now I'm going to have sort of the actual all the troubles of pressing buttons and finishing this.